You're listening to We Deepen Media.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Deepen with Christina. I'm your host, Christina Weber, founder and CEO of We Deepen, Feminine Weapon, and also a certified professional coach for anybody who wants to deepen their joy of the dating journey, or to deepen relationship with your significant other, or who just wants to feel more deeply connected to community. Definitely go to wedeepen.com if you haven't lately and check out all of the upcoming experiences that we have for you. The biohacking conference that is happening in September in Beverly Hills. I'll be facilitating the dating dojo there with Ken Page of Deeper Dating. And Unleash. I'll be actually at Unleash. Unleash is in Austin, Texas, September 23rd through the 25th. And I'll be facilitating the dating dojo there as well. That is a 2-night, 3-day transformational festival. It's one of my favorites. So many couples and love stories stem from that experience because you're just immersed in tantra workshops, connection activities, ecstatic dance. It's substance free. Most of the experiences that you see at wedeepen.com are substance free. If you enjoy this podcast, please go ahead and rate it. Give it a 5-star. You know, I was listening to Mark Grove's podcast recently in prep for today's conversation. And he said, give 5 stars. So I'm going to take that. Give 5 stars on Spotify. If you're listening on Apple, you can go ahead and leave a comment and feedback. And I would love to hear that. And this is actually what helps more people to find the podcast and to get access to the human connection industry, which is what We Deepen aims to shine light on. Today, I have 2 guests on my podcast, and it's, the topic that we're going to discuss is something that has been on my mind for years, more in having my own theories around it and this is the topic of birth control. When I was about 14, 15, menstruating for the first time, I had awful cramps. I mean, it was so painful. I remember even a couple of times my parents took me to the emergency room because the cramps were so bad. However, it was always by the time I got to the emergency room that I would be sitting there waiting to see the doctor and the cramps would go away. And I'd be like, I think I'm fine now. I think we can leave. And the doctor, the OGBYN I was seeing at that time, prescribed me with birth control because birth control, the pill, helped to alleviate cramps. So there at age 14, 15, I was given a life sentence to birth control until about mid-20s, 25. And interesting. So my guest, I'll get into the guest and then I'll come back to finish the story and the connection to how I got myself off of birth control. But my 2 guests here are part of the film, The Business of Birth Control, Holly Grigg-Spall, who is the author of the book, Sweetening the Pill, or How We Got Hooked on Hormonal Birth Control. And that book was then recently turned into a documentary. And when I say recently, it was definitely an 8-year journey is what I hear of that, moving from that book into a documentary. And Anna Kolber, who is a producer of the film, is here as well. And Anna and I have been friends for about a year or 2. Anna has been a a participant in the We Deepen ecosystem and a big supporter as well. And so when I heard that she was a producer of this film, I was like, can we talk? Can we please have a conversation about it? And Holly, I listened to your episode yesterday with you on Mark Grove's podcast, and I hadn't realized before that Mark Groves and I were both pharmaceutical reps. And so coming out of that world, I was a pharmaceutical rep. I'm in my early 40s right now. This was like my mid 20s for a couple of years. That job was one of the greatest trainings I've ever had. I mean, if you've ever got trained within the pharmaceutical industry, it was so immersive. When I was hired, I was in home study for about a month, and then they took us to live in a hotel together, where for a month there was a whole class of sales team that was entering the workforce at that time, or our new territories at the time, all came together. And I mean, it was so extensive. I was also so fascinated how when we were let out into the field, that we were actually the ones who were to educate the physicians on all of the medication. So here are these beautiful people that just went and dispersed into the doctor's office. And that was around when I started to sort of question, what am I really taking? Like, what am I really selling? And that's when I got myself off the pill, because I just felt, who am I? Like, how is this pill really affecting me? So thank you for the work that both of you are doing, and welcome to Deepen with Christina.
Thank you.
Holly, I want to start by asking you, what is your story? How did you get so engrossed with uncovering birth control?
Yeah, so back in about 2007 or so, I had been on pills for about 10 years, different brands. And I spent the previous 2 to 3 years on a brand called Yasmin, also known as Yaz. And at the time, it was very heavily marketed in the US. I was in the UK, but it was later uncovered that they were using a lot of surreptitious marketing techniques to get it into magazines and on TV shows that women watched in order to promote it outside of their jurisdiction, you know, the couple of countries in the world where you can advertise on TV, direct to consumers, pharmaceuticals. And so it was very heavily promoted. Most of the people I knew were on it. And most people who've been on the pill since they were teenagers have been swapped a few times for side effects. And most people don't stay on the same brand. So I was swapped onto Yasmin because it was promoted essentially as one of the pills that was new and modern and side effect free, essentially, and also had lots of benefits. At the time, they were promoting things like it would get rid of your acne, it would deal with your PMS, all kinds of things. And later on, the FDA actually had to reprimand and fine them for overstepping their reach in what they could actually suggest it could be prescribed for. Mm-hmm. But anyway, this is the pill I was on for 2 to 3 years, and I didn't realize for about 2 years that it was causing insidious and sort of cumulative side effects, especially affecting my mental health. So I had anxiety, panic attacks, depression, and a lot of really worrying mental health issues that were building up over the course of starting it. Until, you know, at that point when I realized. And I was a journalist at the time. I used to just do arts and entertainment journalism. So I was writing movie reviews and doing interviews with directors and actors and things like that. And I started doing my own research. And this was before Facebook groups. So I was looking at online forums where women were sharing their experiences. And because so many women had been prescribed this new and exciting pill that was supposed to be the answer to all of our problems, there were a lot of women who then had side effects, and there were a lot of women who took to the internet to share those experiences. And I was reading about those experiences and realizing how similar they were to my own. And that's how I got to put two and two together. And so once I realized that it was causing the issues that I was experiencing, I was able to sort of go back to my doctor. And I still wasn't at that point able to think, well, I won't be on the pill at all. So I got swapped to another brand. During that period, I started doing my own research. I was like, well, if this one was causing these side effects, how was it causing the side effects? And what were the other pills doing? And so that was kind of my jumping off point. And then there was a really great editor, a magazine, a Condé Nast magazine called Easy Living in London, that was very supportive and had me write a big feature for her magazine about the side effects the doctor hasn't told you about, was the title. And I did a ton of research for that piece, and it was only 2 pages, but I had lots and lots and lots of interviews. And that was really the beginning for me. And from there, I moved to the US during the 2008-9 recession. I got married, and while I was waiting for my work visa, I decided to start a blog. I had a ton of time on my hands, and in those days, that's what you did. You started a blog, you didn't do a podcast. And so I decided to do a blog, and I started writing about it. And as these things do go, I got some interest and attention, and I got to write for a few different publications. And then I ended up putting together a book proposal, and that took me up to 2013. It was quite some time for me to find a publisher, and the book got published in 2013.
Wow. Thank you for your commitment to seeing something as something's odd here. There's something deeper here, and to telling that story and going deeper into it. And I'm so curious of, like, as you were putting this information out there, I imagine the stories that you were receiving back had to be a lot to process and somewhat even overwhelming at times.
Well, yeah, when I started with the blog, of course, I had some awareness from the forums that other women had gone through something similar. And this was a worthwhile topic to talk about online publicly, right? So it wasn't a journal. I wrote it knowing I was writing it in order to kind of reach other people. But when I started writing it, I would get comments from women saying, you know, this happened to me, or, you know, worse. And over time, obviously, that got more and more so. And then obviously, once friends knew that I was writing about it, they would come to me and tell me their stories. And I would also publish some of their stories on the blog as well. And yeah, over the years, and this has been now, you know, quite a journey in terms of writing about this topic. I've interviewed hundreds of women about this. And, you know, a lot of them have very similar stories. A lot of them felt very isolated. And you think back then, you may have found an online forum like I did, but you know, there wasn't Instagram, there wasn't people sharing the kind of information they are now on TikTok. There wasn't like the accessibility of hormone health coaches, or people talking about women's health issues, or even really people talking openly about like periods. It just wasn't what was happening at the time. So it was almost like this kind of underground network of people finding each other very, you know, slowly to share that they had also had these experiences. But for the most part, most of the people I spoke to as women felt very isolated and didn't think it happened to anybody else. Most of them blamed themselves and said, oh, well, I can't tolerate the pill, or there's something wrong with my body, or there's something that means that it doesn't work for me. And very few women were making the connection that, no, this isn't you. This is just the pill and how it works. And my aim, one of my aims with my work was partly, you know, to help any woman who went through what I did make the connection sooner, so that they aren't suffering, not realizing it could be their medication, which is what I went through. And also just to connect people. So rather than us all thinking, oh, it's just me, that we realize it was an experience, as a collective female experience, is birth control pill side effects or birth control side effects, and that, you know, it's an issue that should be taken up socially and culturally, and it's something that, you know, we can look at from the perspective of it being something that women experience as a whole rather than just individually.
You know, I had Dave Asprey on a recent podcast episode, number 44, and we speak a bit about ovulation and attraction, and how women tend to be more attractive during ovulation. That's something. And during that second week of your cycle is, you can feel more confident in yourself. And at 35 is when I first began to start understanding my cycle. It was information that they completely neglected to teach us in our educational curriculums. So here I was, 20 years after beginning to menstruate, that now I'm understanding how my body actually works. And in preparing for today, I watched the documentary. It was phenomenal. Well done. And before I went to watch it, I started Googling some, and I found this Rolling Stones article titled "The Problem with Ricki Lake's The Business of Birth Control." And first off, I do want to acknowledge Ricki Lake is one of the producers of this film as well. And I started reading this article, and I could feel like almost the rage inside of me, as this is such bullshit. And it was fascinating also to see that something that is so well intended was then just poked at without acknowledging the actual good of the film. Sure, I'm down for thoughtful discourse. Bring it on. However, the claims that this particular article is making, and the way that she was doing about it was kind of the same way that she was knocking the film. So first of creating, making people feel skeptical about what the information is. And then in a way of pointing to, oh, this film is just trying to make money. Like, look at that. They have developed a whole bunch of other options. And so now you can go and look at all the investors in the film. And I wanted to just even call bullshit on that, because when you see like that, when you develop such passion for that something needs to be done differently, of course, you're going to invest your time and energy into providing other options for people. And those other options are going to be part of the ecosystem that you're going to want to communicate and share with women about, or even men too, because men do need to be part of the conversation. And then when I went and watched the film, there was a moment, I guess, from like the 60s, that there was, everybody's in trial. They're all in court, and there's a bunch of men speaking, and these women are just sitting there listening to a bunch of men speaking. And finally they stand up and they start to demand that their voice is being heard, because it's not included. And to be able, we hear about that, but to be able to see how you painted that story, and then it just brought me into, the great work that you're doing and the skepticism around it from the climate of quote unquote conspiracy theorists. And it also, Charles Eisenstein was a recent podcast guest on Political Hope. And at the end of that show, the host, this is another show on the We Deepen Network, the show asked him, what are you going to do moving forward? Like, what are you going to do with your work? And he was feeling that he was like considering changing his career path, because he was getting so much anger pointed at him for doing such good work out in the world. So how do you process when pieces like that, like the Rolling Stones article, come at you with daggers?
Anna, did you want to talk about it? I mean, you're relatively newer to this process, so I feel like your perspective would be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, anything we do, I think nowadays it's almost like anything you say is controversial, because there's always going to be someone who disagrees, and there's so much disagreement right now and polarization. And what I feel is it does make you angry, because, again, that article and other, negative connotations towards this film or what the message we're saying diminishes women's reality and real life experiences. And since I've been working on this film for the past 4 years or something, like when I talk about it, the majority of women that I tell this to reflect back to me with a story of like, oh, I can't be on the pill. I can't be on the pill. I can't be on the pill. This happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. So I'm getting it from everywhere that, again, it's a topic that's happening to everyone. Not to everyone. I mean, some people are on the pill and they're fine. But it is happening to a lot of women, and more women reflected back to me that they were having these experiences than not. And so, you know, but again, it's as Holly was saying, we weren't communicating with each other. And I think it's really important to do that. And I think you always know you're going to get pushback, and like, we're touching the people who need to hear this. And the women who are having issues with their birth control pill are looking at this film and are tuning in.
Yeah. And
and I think, you know, with the piece, it's like you both said, you know, it just doesn't really tackle head on the fact that women do experience side effects on the pill. We all know that. And so the only way it can really attack the film is by placing that to one side, because in this day and age, saying that isn't happening is kind of absurd. We know it happens. We know how many women come off birth control methods because of side effects. So many women have written about it since I started. You know, this is a much bigger movement than when I began. So they kind of have to put that aside and pick other things to chip away at in order to make a case. So, you know, because they can't actually break that down, because you can't, you know, who's going to go into the media as a female journalist today and say, like, no, I don't believe women are experiencing side effects. I don't believe women when they share their experiences. I mean, that's just not where we're at right now. So I think, you know, I'm very used to this kind of idea of like, well, you know, this is something that is a problem to talk about per se. Like, you just shouldn't be talking about it because it's an issue that is going to cause women to come off the pill when they're not ready and get pregnant when they don't want to be pregnant. And, you know, there's a lot of sort of almost like blackmail-y kind of rhetoric around the idea of like preventing people talking about it. So, yeah, I mean, they're not going to deal with the reality because that's kind of undeniable at this point. But what they can deal with, especially when you have a film that's full of like so many powerful personal stories from women who are saying like, this is what happened to me. This is tragic or traumatizing, or, you know, how can you in good conscience say, oh, that's just a phony, that woman's just making things up. And, you know, when my book came out, like, people did say things like that. So, you know, I was called all sorts of names and made all sorts of assumptions and suggestions made about me online. So people, you know, do say that, but it's not going to go down so well some 10 years later. So, yeah, they have to pick away at sort of ridiculous things instead. And the idea of picking away at like, well, there are alternatives, rather than saying, oh, isn't it interesting that the movie includes David Kessler, former FDA commissioner, talking about how one of the most popular birth control pills to have ever existed was actually illegally marketed. And they took research out in order to get it like put through and get it on the market. And like, no, let's not talk about that story. Wow. Let's talk about the fact that there are alternatives featured in the film that happen to be sold for money. Like, we live in capitalism, price.
Exactly. We do. That's this. It takes money to create a film and to provide alternatives as well. This needs to be funded. So congratulations.
Oh, yeah. And like, you know, you've highlighted the fact that it was like, says at the end of that article, oh, well, they made this film to make money. I mean, we all know, like, if Michael Moore isn't in it and if it's not about penguins, it's not making money as a documentary. Like, they're usually labors of love and they're usually passion projects. And this one certainly is. And so, you know, the idea that it was a sort of, oh, let's take advantage of this burgeoning movement to cash in is just, lowest common denominator stuff, which I think what it really suggests is that, you've got something really good on your hands, you've made something really worthwhile. If like with my book, one of the main reviews that came out in the beginning was like basically said, don't read this book. And if you've written a really good book, if people feel the need to tell people not to read the book, and you've made a really good movie when it's already behind a paywall. We do free windows, but you have to pay to stream it. It's only available via the website. It's not on Netflix. It's not on Hulu. But people still feel the need to go into Rolling Stone magazine and say, "Oh, don't watch this movie."
Exactly. I was so
if anything, it's great, because I think if you're a savvy, intelligent person, you're going to go, wow, what is this movie about?
Yes. And I was actually, that article, I was so disturbed too, that it was like the third thing that came up on Google. And then of course I took the author of it, Amy Zimmerman, and started Googling her to see what other articles. This was the first piece that she's ever written for Rolling Stones. She's done other articles for the Daily Beast. However, they all seem to be around dreadful, it's just, I didn't, maybe I went into it not respecting her a little bit, and then just was finding other things to back my story within that. And she also does make the case of how it's so rare that the people who have issues or challenges using birth control, that's, that you kind of found these, a really small group of people that had been affected. Whereas, Anna, I just even heard you say, when you talk to women, it's really a lot, everyone kind of has something that was affected. And maybe some people do say, I'm fine on it. But what's really fine, when we don't really have anything to necessarily to compare it to, and how it affects mood, bone density, libido, metabolism, some of those things that we just end up coping with, but don't know where that's, why that's happening to us, or what's possible inside of that. So, and I also in the documentary, there was this line that says that there was a scientifically step forward in the control of nature. And why do we need something to step forward to control nature? We know that nature is uncontrollable. So what's the possibility of that? Like, how are we going to control nature? So I'd love to, can you talk to us about some of the side effects that you are seeing, and some of those side effects that are maybe obvious, and some of the ones that are subtle that we might not even realize how it's affecting us?
Sure, yeah. So in the film, we look at a lot of, like you mentioned, some of the aspects that we look at. And there's two sides to it. There's the side effects of the medication, and then there's the benefits of the cycle, right? So the first thing you have to know is, by taking the birth control pill or most hormonal birth control options, you're stopping ovulation, and you're replacing the menstrual cycle. So the hormones in those methods are not the same as the hormones that your body produces, but it tells your body to stop producing its own hormones and to stop ovulating. So you're not ovulating and you're not having a period. Now, you'd be surprised how many women get into their 30s and don't know that. So that's worth saying. And so once you lay out the groundwork of actually like what is happening there, so you're dealing with two things, like the effects of the pill and what's possible with a unmedicated menstrual cycle, and the benefits of ovulating. And so we look at a lot of the documentary looks at the mental health side effects, like depression risk and suicide risk, and we highlight women's stories who've experienced debilitating mental health issues from their hormonal birth control method. We also look at the blood clot risk of the so-called newer third generation methods, like the one I mentioned, Yasmin or Yaz, that I was on, also the Nuva ring, and these methods that are still on the market that were put out as like new and improved, but actually are no more effective at preventing pregnancy, but have a higher risk of causing injury and death to those who use them. And then the other part of it is looking at the kind of whole system effect of taking the birth control pill and what it means to replace the hormonal system that we experience on a monthly basis. So everything, like you mentioned, from metabolic issues to the benefits of ovulation in bone, heart, and breast health, to anything that we're missing out on in terms of vitamin deficiencies and nutritional deficiencies due to the effect on the metabolic system and gut health, what we're missing out on experiencing ovulation, which makes hormones, testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, the whole system effect, essentially, because, we've all often been taught that we take something, it kind of magically just does what it does and stops, us getting pregnant, but there's nothing else that's affected. It's just the uterus, ovary centric, which isn't true. And what this looks like on the short term and on the long term. And so I think you kind of alluded to the idea that both of you alluded to the idea that, yes, there are women who say, well, I feel fine on the pill. And that's great. If you feel you need to take hormonal birth control and you feel fine, and that's good. I mean, your cost benefit analysis is personal to you. So whether you think that the cost of taking it is not as big a problem to you as the benefits that you receive from it, and your day-to-day isn't affected, okay, maybe that's a good equation for you. But I think I say in my book something like all women will experience side effects. It's just impossible not to. You're taking a medication that you're taking every day that stops your menstrual cycle. So you will, whether they affect your day-to-day quality of life, you may not know at the time. You may only know when you come off. I've taught workshops for years to women. I've had women in my workshops that have come off the pill after 20 years, 30 years, and then gone, oh, I felt like this and I didn't even know. Because how would you know if you went on when you were 14 and didn't come off until you were 54 and didn't realize how you felt? Like you just, that's what happens. I mean, often they're insidious, often they're something that, you think this is just how I am, right? So yeah, I think that we look at the whole array, and we talk to lots of experts from different angles in terms of that. People who are research scientists, people who are naturopathic doctors, MDs, OBGYNs, different people from different perspectives saying, like, this is what it says in the research that we have, which is admittedly limited, as all women's health research is. And this is the evidence that we get through speaking with women in their experiences.
And I remember hearing you say this on Mark Grove's podcast, that it's essentially the female body is being, it's being manipulated to almost be in a stage of menopause. And this is something, as a young woman, you tend to fear. Oh no, I don't want to get to menopause. I don't want to get to menopause. And then, but it's unavoidable. We're going to get to it in like our 40s and 50s. And now in our teens and 20s and 30s, what we don't know is that on the pill, your body is actually acting in a state that it would be in menopause.
Yeah, and I think that is, that is a fact that's getting more traction these days. I think it's because we have often been told, like the other myths, like the pill regulates your cycle, or the pill protects your fertility. The pill puts you in a state of pregnancy is the myth that we usually hear.
Yeah, I got that one.
You would, from your doctor or in books, and And so that pregnancy state is actually quite a high, changeable, fluctuating hormonal state. Whereas when you take the pill, as I said before, you're removing your hormone production and replacing it with a flat line of synthetic hormones that you're taking every day at the same level. So what you would normally have is fluctuations of estrogen, progesterone, testosterone through the cycle, FSH, LH, through the cycle, up and down every month. Pretty predictable, but that they are still going up and down in surges and troughs. But with the pill, it's just flat. The experience is flat because you're taking a pill that's just synthetic hormones of the same amount every day. The idea is to avoid those hormonal triggers that cause you to ovulate. So that's flat. So that's the experience that you're having. And so with menopause, obviously you stop having a cycle, right? That's what menopause is. You stop having menstruation. And so that is a more similar experience, right? It's a low hormone experience. So your body's not producing, with the pill, the body's producing none to very, very low amounts of its own hormone. It's a flat experience. There's no ovulation. There's no period. So if you really think about it, it makes sense. But we've been told, oh, it puts you in a state of pregnancy. I think I've never looked into directly where that specifically came from, but I assume it's one of those things like the placebo week of the pill that was developed in order to sort of sell the pill to women, in a sense that, oh, this is what it's doing. This is understandable for you as a lay person. And also it avoids difficult conversations, right? Because they assume most women will be or want to be pregnant at some point. So it's not such a scary idea. Whereas, as you said, with menopause, although menopause is great, it's going to be fine. Like, we shouldn't skip fear menopause. A lot of women do, right? And so that, if you said, oh, well, it's okay, the pill's it's just going to put you in a state of menopause, we'd be a bit more like, I don't know about that, right? So they don't want a lot of that going on.
Yeah, wait till my time. Wait till I get there at the right age, not any time before. You mentioned fertility, and we tend to get on birth control because we don't want to get pregnant, but then we get off because, hey, maybe we do want to get pregnant. How is it affecting women and they're getting pregnant afterwards?
Well, I think the main thing is that we don't get taught anything about the cycle. So we don't get taught how to know when we ovulate or when our fertile window is. And we don't have a very long fertile window. It's only 6 days per cycle that you can achieve pregnancy and conceive. Now, if you go to most doctors, they'll say, well, have sex around day 14 of your cycle, every other day, and you'll get pregnant. Now, doing that for a lot of women who have longer cycles or irregular cycles, or their cycles change because of stress or illness or anything, because they do change, you could miss that window pretty easily for months. It wouldn't be hard to miss that window. So you've got a lot of people who come off the pill, first of all, it could take you up to 6 months to get your cycle back. That's just, 3 months is the average, but it can take up to 6 months to get your cycle back. And then once you do, you don't know anything other than, I think I ovulate around day 14. That's assuming I have a 28-day cycle. So I'll have sex a couple of times, then maybe that'll work out. They're not taught anything about cervical fluid. So then you have a lot of people who sort of going, I think, I see this happening, going from the sort of pipeline of the pill to IVF because they don't have any kind of grasp on what's happening with their cycle. And they don't realize it's kind of more complicated than we were sold when we were teenagers in school, which is this idea of like that you sort of constantly, day to day could get pregnant at any moment with any, possible thing that would happen to you. So it's a bit more work and it's a bit more involvement for some people. And also, when you come off the pill, you may be dealing with nutritional deficiencies. You may really need to supplement to be able to maintain a pregnancy. So there are some issues that, a lot of women will come off and maybe they'll be fine. They get pregnant right away. But then some don't. And some people are just left in the dark, not realizing that you kind of have to know your cycle better, get, a year of doing that. Then they're said that to be infertile, then they end up trying to have IVF and things like that. Or they just don't get the support that they need after being on the pill for, 10, 15 years.
I think there's definitely much to uncover within the issue of fertility that is happening universally around. I have tons of friends who are highly healthy individuals and are not able to get pregnant nowadays. I feel that's maybe a future documentary.
Well, I think that is interesting. And I was listening to a couple of podcasts recently that were talking about that. And I think there's a few things going on. I think that we're sold this idea that we can delay pregnancy into, 40s, 50s, and we'll still be able to get pregnant, no problem. And part of that is the pill being sold to us as like protecting our fertility or treating our endometriosis or treating our PCOS or treating our fibroids or treating things that it's not treating. And then you're coming off and having to deal with it, down the line rather than having had it dealt with. With most of my friends who were on the pill during the time working on this, they said to me, and I've had several friends say this to me over the years, well, what should I do? I'm on the pill. I want to have a child. I said, well, just come off and give yourself a good run. So don't assume, if you want to get pregnant before you're 40, make sure you're off and give yourself time to figure out if you have hormonal health issues to deal with, if you have fertility issues to deal with, give yourself time to deal with them, knowing that they haven't been fixed. They've just been quiet, maybe not even that. And then, we'll also have what is healthy. A lot of women these days are using diets, following protocols, doing things that were designed and researched for male bodies only, actually. And they're being sold to us as healthy when they're not meant to be what women are doing, because our biology is different. So yes, they might be really healthy for men and men might thrive on those protocols, but they're not healthy for women. And if a woman's body is under stress, if you're under eating, if you're over exercising, if you're doing things that lots of our culture these days deems as healthy, the first thing your body will do will stop ovulating because it's not an essential process. So your body will just switch off ovulation to save energy, to put it elsewhere, to keep you going. So that's lots of what I see is women who think they're super healthy, but because they're, the perfect weight and run 2 hours a day, and actually they're doing all the wrong things for their health, because that's just going to make your body freak out and think, well, there's no way this body can sustain a pregnancy. So
that's so fascinating to think about, that the body will stop ovulating to save energy when it's, focused on potentially healing something else inside of its system. And I'll say even with birth control or anything that you're putting in your body, it's harder to fully tap into your own internal guidance system when there's something else. When you're putting something in your body, it's similar to, alcohol or any type of drugs. You're not really fully able to connect with your own intuition of, how, because our bodies are actually so magnificent, they can heal themselves. And within taking that pill, you're changing your chemistry. Now, are all pills hormonal birth control pills?
Well, you have two different kinds, really. You have the progestin only, and then you have the progestin estrogen combination pill. So they're all synthetic hormones. I think there's one bioidentical hormone brand that is available, but otherwise, yes, they're all synthetic hormone based. Mm-hmm.
They all are. Okay. Because I noticed myself starting to get a little confused of, no hormonal birth control. And I was like, well, which ones aren't? And are pills, I'll say, which ones aren't? So that's good to even.
Oh, well, when I say most hormonal birth controls, the only thing I'm putting to one side is the hormone-based IUD. Which is progestin only. Using the hormone-based IUD, some women continue to ovulate and continue to have a period and continue to experience a cycle. Not usually it will stop at some point, 1 or 2 years into use, but it's slightly different. So, when you're talking about the side effects of hormonal birth control, and you're talking about like stopping ovulation and not experiencing a period and not creating your own hormones and things like that, that's the only kind of outlier that specifically needs to be talked about. Doesn't mean it doesn't have side effects or that it doesn't have a whole body effect. It does. It just is slightly different.
It's slightly different. Okay. So let's talk about mating and how birth control affects the mating process, which I'm most interested in, considering my work has been around dating. I started working in the quote unquote dating industry in 2014, and with a curated dating experience that I would bring 20 men, 20 women together, and I would do this event month after month. And I had just imagined when I started to do it that we'd all find our partners and we'd all live happily ever after. And there's something to say about in the dating process that you're smelling your partner. There's pheromones at play. There's attraction at play. There's a lot of these biological processes that are happening underneath that we're not really aware of, and we weren't taught of what's happening as well. And we can look at it and see animals. You can see how animals are going through their mating process, but like humans, our brain can't fully comprehend that. So when somebody is, when you have a large population, I think there was a stat in the documentary that said 80% of women will get put on birth control. Is that correct?
I think 80% of women have tried using it at some point, but I don't know if it's Yeah,
80% of American women have tried birth control or hormonal birth control, the pill, at some point. Mm-hmm. How could that be affecting the mating process?
Yeah, I don't know. Anna, did you want to give your perspective on this? I don't know when you came to this topic, but it would be interesting.
Well, what I know from what we hear from the science and from the films is that it does change. Being on the pill changes who you're attracted to. So the partner you choose when you're on the pill is someone who's more like a family member. And then sometimes when women go off the pill, they are no longer attracted to their partners because their hormones have changed and they wouldn't have chosen that person. And I mean, we have some people talking about that. And I actually even have friends who have said specifically that, like, they went off the pill when they're trying to get pregnant and then were no longer attracted to their husband. And then it also affects libido, and it can really drastically reduce your libido for some people. And a relationship can suffer because you no longer are, feeling like being amorous with the person you're with. So there's a lot of different aspects going on in that sense.
So your libido when you're on the pill dies down. So a lot of times people will get onto the pill after they've gotten into a relationship with someone. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying it can affect your libido. So it just depends, right? You might be on the pill and then meet someone, or you might meet someone and then go on the pill. But the point is who you're attracted to can change because it changes your hormones and who we are. Like as you were just saying, there's a lot of things that like with hormones and pheromones and smells and how we choose our partner that happens subconsciously that maybe you might not know or be aware of. But there is science based that we choose people who are different from us and to mate with. But if your hormones are different, your sense is off because it's incorrect because you have different hormones, and you would choose someone who maybe is not a viable person for you. So you could be on the pill and you meet someone and you choose that person, then you go off the pill because you want to try to have a baby and you're no longer attracted to your partner.
And you've known people that have had this particular experience as well.
I know personally people have had this exact experience and ended up getting divorced because they had chosen the wrong person for them. I'm sure there's also other reasons that contribute to that, but I have personally heard that story as well. And maybe Holly can speak in depth about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I wrote very small amount in my book about. There's a study that I think you referred to with your conversation with Dave Asprey, which is it's a study that they did with women who are strippers, where they kind of tried to test, as a small study, but they tried to test what kind of tips that they got from men if they were ovulating, not ovulating, or on the pill. And those on the pill got the least. Now, I mean, this is a this is a small study. It's there's more there's more research on this topic, unsurprisingly, because it involves men, than there are on like other serious issues that women experience from the pill, to be honest. It's a little annoying, but it is obviously something that people find really interesting. They've always found interesting through my last 10 plus years I've worked on this. I personally didn't experience that. In fact, my take on it is always that, like, if you find a man that's going to support you in not being on the pill, they're usually a pretty good one to stick with, because a lot of men are not terribly supportive of having to navigate that process. Condoms, menstrual cycle, periods, learning fertility awareness, behaving differently in the fertile window and not. Like, that is like, you have to have somebody who respects you, who is not like grossed out by women's bodies, which is surprisingly lots of people, and is happy to like take responsibility and like work with you on those levels, which is, is a different kind of relationship actually, and a different kind of intimacy. And so that's like, if often, yes, it's smell, and yes, we are animals, and we've always been taught that like ovulation was in humans is covert for some reason, but like, yeah, we're animals. So we give off signs that we ovulate, like our actions, our behavior, what we look like changes slightly. And yeah, the smell that we give off, because we're part of nature, we're not sort of exempt from those things. But of course, we also have rationality, and we also have like executive function and decision making. And so that all comes into play as well. But yeah, I think it's something that I've been asked about and heard about for years. And it's certainly something that women really relate to, this sort of almost like visceral sense of like the sense of smell changing, like going from finding someone smell like comforting and attractive and kind of enjoyable to finding it like disgusting almost. And we talk about this in the film, the science behind it, practitioners who've experienced it, from like naturopaths to psychologists. We interview a psychologist who's really interesting, and says like, I tell people to come off before they get married, like a good 6 months to a year before, so that you get like to feel what that feels like, and not go through it, once you're, back from honeymoon and decided you want to try and get pregnant, which I think is really interesting. So yeah, it's definitely something people relate to. I think there's a lot of levels to it. There is some interesting research out there about like interactions and how we choose our partners. And certainly, as Anna said, a lot of people feel that they've experienced that.
I have to think too about, procreation, and I think that's why that study of looking at the strippers and the strippers who are on birth control and not on birth control, and how much tips that they got, is so interesting to know why people are talking a lot about that one as well. Is, in thinking of the tying, kind of like this whole holistic of tying all the schools of thoughts together, and the progression that, for lack of a better words right now, I know sometimes people are triggered by this, but like the health freedom movement. And Dr. Zach Bush had said recently a stat of that, if we keep moving in the direction that we're going in, that by 2056, about that 1 in 3 children will be born autistic. And I have to question if people are mating with people that they generally biologically wouldn't have, like nature wouldn't have pulled them together. How is that affecting the offspring as well?
I think that, when I started my work in this, when one of the questions I ask is, if you have a huge amount of the population of women on a medication for, maybe at least a decade of their lives, say long term anyway, then not only how does it affect you as an individual, like your quality of life and your health, but also what does that mean for us as a whole? And I think, science usually starts with like a hypothesis, right? Like, what is this possible? Well, let's look and see. But the problem is that like we live in like a world that's so steeped with, and more people are talking about this. I talk about this in the film, the endocrine disruptors. Yes, the pill is an important endocrine disruptor that we're taking every day, but we're surrounded by them. There's a lot going on that's affecting our hormones, that's affecting our hormone levels in men and women. And we're taking all that on constantly. So, we don't have a control. Often, even in studies on the pill, the control is not women experiencing unmedicated menstrual cycles. So we can hypothesize all we want, and people have hypothesized about this, about the effect not only on relationships, like we were just saying, but on the health of children, or the health of the progression of women, or the things that have happened in our society since. But we're never going to be able to unpick it because it's been in play for so long. I think it's difficult to say. Just theorizing of the possibilities, yes. Once you make the decision to medicate such a large proportion of the population in the way that we have from teenage years onwards, then anything is possible.
Yeah, to medicate, and then looking at I can even see this from friends as well, as that there's then the depression starts, and it's like, oh, take this pill and this pill, and instead of even looking at, oh, maybe the birth control was what was causing the depression. And that
can be a gateway medication to other medications. I've had friends who've gone off the pill and then they go off their SSRI or their anxiety, usually often their anxiety medication. So yeah, yes, it can become one thing after another for sure. But yeah.
What's the most interesting thing that has happened as an outcome of the film being released?
Anna, would you like to, while I think, do you have something?
No, I don't know if I can. Most interesting thing that's happened. I don't have any specific examples either. Just, this is just us creating a conversation and having more and more people talk about it. And we're really calling for better birth control, because it's like, why are billions of dollars being invested in improving something that has such side effects and could so easily be improved, or better alternatives could be found? Why have they just left this on the market as is?
And why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's, as it always is, like, it's making money, and all the lawsuits against pharmaceutical companies in regarding to the birth control pill, they make so much money that it doesn't affect them. And I also think that because it's a male-dominated industry, like it is with many others. They did tests for the male birth control pill, and they canceled the test because the side effects were so great. And they said, we can't bring this to market, and it's the same side effects that we have, but it was okay to bring it for us. So.
Yeah, I think that's interesting to talk about the pharmaceutical companies. I think whilst you're speaking, I realizing probably for me, the most interesting thing is someone has wrote the book, then it was optioned for the movie in 2014 and became a movie. It was like, I could see this movement building over time. Like, it's nothing, like when I was writing about this, I kind of felt like I was on my own. I wasn't completely. I was able to speak with people and connect with them and do phone interviews and stuff. But like, it's such a bigger movement now. And what I find interesting is that they've really struggled to get media attention on the film, and to get distribution, and to get it onto a streaming platform. And while it's not surprising perhaps to me, it kind of is, because in a sense, I felt like we'd progressed in the time since I started writing about this. And is interesting to me is that the idea that this is obviously, you've seen controversial topics around medical issues and pharma addressed. There's a big documentary on Netflix about the beauty industry, which is hugely money making, right? We've seen films about all kinds of topics around women's health that look at their medical devices or look at different aspects. But this particular topic, as I had intuited when I started writing it, is so, like I talk about in my book, like how we got addicted to hormonal birth control what it means to me is how did we become as a society so dependent on it? And what is interesting to me is it just illustrates how dependent we are on it, because it is a topic that, like, unlike many other topics around this or similar topics, it is about the fact that a lot of media is funded by pharmaceutical advertising, and they are their biggest funders, and they, that is a big industry. But it's more than that. Like, it's even more than that. There's unpicking why we are okay with prescribing the birth control pill to young girls and leaving women on it for years as we do, why we don't talk about the menstrual cycle, why we don't talk about the benefits of ovulation. This stuff is goes really deep in our society, and once you start unpicking it, it has potential to really to open a huge can of worms, basically, and really make us question the direction that we took, and the myths we've been sold, and our position today, and what that means. And I think, the fact that we are self-distributing, even at this point, even after free weekend windows where it's gone viral, even after we've had thousands of people watch the movie, the huge positive feedback that we've gotten, there's so many women sharing their stories, that it isn't just been, put up on Hulu tomorrow to get, it's fascinating to me. Because we're talking about saying, well, it's about making money. Well, yeah, but this movie could make a streamer a lot of money because it's such a controversial movie, in a sense, that it would bring in so much interest to some of these struggling streamers. But why? It's not just about that. There's something else. There's something that we know in this topic that we know is so fundamental to how we structured our society since its creation. And even before that, the way that we completely erase the history of medicine women and midwives pre the invention of the white coat doctor. It's so deep in there that I think people, it's not just about the capitalism side of it. It's about even more than that.
Yeah, so there's a fear of if they pull that string, oh my gosh, do we have the bandwidth to even dive into that? And people are, there's the everyone's always doing the best they can until they know how to do better. And even inside of the organizations that are promoting birth control and other things that have an opportunity to be should be looked at as, okay, this got us so far. Now, how do we evolve? How do we keep, up leveling based upon the information that we learned? Okay, great. We've got this far. Let's keep evolving and evolving. And as a whole, because partly of, the pharmaceuticals, the alcohol industry, social media, people are distracted, and they don't even too much know about what I call the self-development industry. And you have to almost combine the two of, having a growth mindset to actually be able to have the bandwidth and the energy to go out and keep evolving and keep making a difference. And it reminds me of a friend of mine is a senator in Washington, D.C. Now, I will caveat that Washington, D.C. doesn't have statehood. So he's a shadow senator. And a couple years ago, I had asked him, he was a new friend at the time. And I said, Paul, we're doing, there's so many people that I'm surrounded. They all have life coaches and they're aiming to do better. What's happening there in the Senate? It's like, what's happening in the Capitol? And he said, oh my God, it's just a bunch of people. They're so triggered and they're all just throwing their shit over and over against each other. And everyone is just like a mess. And so there is this unraveling because you're asking people to work harder, to do more, to think differently. And that does require that thread to be pulled and for people to deepen. And a lot of times, we need to look around and be like, who actually has the energy to lead this type of change and movement?
Yeah. And I think the other thing that we find is a lot of women are very, they come from a very defensive place, in that they feel like talking about the side effects of the birth control pill is an indictment of their own decision to take the pill, right? So rather than receiving it as important public information to know about, they are like, oh, you're judging me for taking the pill, or you're saying, but what about women who like taking the pill? Well, we're not coming from a place of saying you shouldn't take the pill, or we want to ban the pill, or that the option shouldn't be available to us. And that's always been the way in my experiences, is this defensiveness when you come from that and you think, oh, well, this is about you talking about my choices. And then that brings up a lot of fear in people too. Like, some people have been on the pill for 10 years, 15 years, and someone's telling you it does X, Y, Z to your body. You're like, well, I'm not, instead of wanting to come off the pill and see how that it feels for me and directly deal with that, your fear is that, oh, okay, I'm going to say that you're just making that up, because it's easier, right, than having to grapple with the idea that you made a choice for yourself. And in my workshops, I'm not a health practitioner, so my workshops very much come from that point of view of emotional, social transition through going off the pill. And I kind of talk people through the idea that this isn't your fault. It's not something that you did to yourself. We are surrounded by pressures to take the pill. You probably went on it as a teenager. It was probably your mom's decision or your doctor's decision, or it's not you that you didn't do this to yourself. You don't need to feel guilty. That if you made the choice not to, that tends to be the outlier choice, because we are surrounded by incredible cultural pressures to do lots of things, including take hormonal birth control. So, but you kind of have to work through that in order to get to the other side, because otherwise, yes, it can just make you feel very defensive and very scared.
Do you guys know Ariel White of My Little Yoni?
I know of her. I don't know her personally, but I love that. I've heard all about it, and I know people with children who have bought those books, and I've heard they're fantastic.
Ariel White, she did, I believe she's episode 14 of Deep In with Christina, and we talk about the history of sex ed and how to speak to your children about sex. And she has done a 14-book series to educate girls and boys, little girls and boys, and every gender in between, of their bodies. And I believe that you guys I would love to give an introduction to you, because she would love this. And I think there's an opportunity for you to work together. Thank you so much for what you're doing in the world. Before I end this, Holly, you mentioned these workshops. What can you speak to me a little bit about the workshops that you're doing?
Well, right now, there is a recording of a workshop I have on my website, sweeteningthepill.com, that's available. It's only $20 or something. It's a workshop I did with a bunch of period coaches. So if you're interested in the kind of workshops I'm talking about, it is available through there. I also have a longer, more in-depth workshop on there called The Feminist Guide to Going Off the Pill, which kind of looks at it from a women's history, women's kind of movement perspective. And I haven't gone back to doing in-person workshops because the space where I used to do them no longer exists, unfortunately. But yeah, I used to do workshops about going off the pill, but not from a you should take this supplement, you should eat this thing, you should do this exercise, because that's not my background. I come at it from a very like emotional, social standpoint. So like how to discuss it with your partner, how to discuss it with your doctor if you need to, how your friends might react, the kind of triggers and concerns and anxieties that will come up for you through the process that might prevent you making the decision that's best for you, or make you then go back on the pill because of that. And it's kind of like your relationship to your period, in like internalized fear around pregnancy and around like being grossed out by your own cycle, and like the messages we receive about that. So I kind of come at it from like just from like that kind of emotional standpoint, like you were saying, like having to actually work through your issues that you have. Sort of the pill allows us to just not talk about things, allows us to just take the pill, and then we don't talk about a lot of things. We don't talk about our fertility goals, we don't talk about our periods, we don't have to talk about, it allows us to kind of put a mute button on a lot of issues. So when you come off, it can be quite overwhelming for that reason too. It's not just all about like what to do so that what to take and what to eat and stuff, which is what most people focus on.
You're reminding me a little bit more of that Rolling Stones article, because one of the cases that she was making, or that I interpreted, was that some human beings aren't smart enough to learn their own cycle and how it works. And so the pill is actually something that uncomplicates things for them and let them be, because it would require so much work for them to understand how their cycle worked, and for them to find other preventative options are harder. And so let them be. And it was that also too was like, what?
Yeah, I had an interview recently with someone who said something similar and said, well, you have to admit that it's a really difficult learning curve. And I'm like, well, yeah, but like what we're saying is you should be able to learn this in school. Like this should be like, you shouldn't get to 35 and have to figure it out. Like, yes, you're right. Like it shouldn't be that. It should be in something that you are learning at the right stages at the right times as you get older, and like building on that knowledge. And once you have that knowledge, my philosophy has always been, if you have the knowledge of how your cycle works and your fertility awareness works and how you have menstrual cycle awareness, then if you choose to take the pill for a couple of years, okay, but at least you're coming at it from an informed perspective. But the idea that we don't know, I think that's just a way, really it's not about like it's setting it up to be like, oh, well, I really care. Like I acknowledge that this is really hard for some people. And it's like, okay, but it's also really hard to like cook and feed yourself in a healthy way, rather than just to use like a microwave to make like but we ask people to do that all the time, right? Don't we? Isn't that a huge thing? And nobody wants to say like, oh, but they don't have enough time, even though some people legitimately might not have enough time. We don't say that. Like we're expecting people to make efforts and make decisions based around their health all the time, but this one apparently, and that's suspicious to me. Why is this one specifically too difficult? Is it because it's women? I don't know.
You have to see
a lot of people on the fertility awareness method, I mean, have done it really well. I mean, there's a person in our film who had 4 children and exactly knew when her window to get pregnant, never had any issues. So
yeah, and I 10 plus years, no children. So that's like the most successful you can possibly be. So.
You have to think of some of this as comedy. Like Jet, who's a facilitator of a workshop, it's improv meets emotional intelligence called Clown Church. And she says this line that tragedy plus time equals comedy. And you can replace time with space if you zoom out and kind of look down on humanity and everything that's happening, and you can see this particular thing, like how, like there's there's something about this that is just so bizarre that it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's definitely got an absurdist level to it, and it gets that way after you've done it for long enough and you keep hearing the same arguments. I just did an interview recently with somebody who was coming at it from a very critical viewpoint. And I was like, oh, God, I've heard these arguments. And she was saying, oh, that study on depression is just like retrospective. And I was like, okay, I'm going to stop you there. Yeah, I'm going to list all the reasons that you won't like that study. But the thing is don't care anymore. Like, you don't like that one study. Are you trying to say that like depression isn't a legitimate side effect of the pill? Well, then, you're telling a bunch of women that they're wrong and their lived experience isn't real, and you're gaslighting them. And it is absurd. It's like it becomes absurd. It's like, why are we so struggling and fighting so much to deny what's happening when we're very aware of it? What is it that we're afraid that we're giving up? And to an extent, I think I've always thought it's like political power, really, because once you have that body literacy and that body knowledge, you're not really answerable to the current political football that we have going on, or have had going on in this country for years, between the left and the right, which uses women's health as like a bargaining chip, right? To the detriment of women. Always just, it's just used as a way of like controlling I think that is one of the things that we're afraid of, unfortunately.
Yeah. A couple of things that you can't control: nature and women. Not controllable. I don't even think men are controllable. I don't think any human being is controllable. So I'll add that in as well. Thank you both for your time and energy in recording this episode with me. Is there any last minute words or things that you want the listeners to know?
That you can stream the film at thebusinessofbirthcontrol.com right now. And we have a summer only discount code of BOBC50, the number, BOBC50, all capital letters with the number. And you get 50% off streaming. So if you go to the Business of Birth Control, you can use that to stream the movie, and you can see it as soon as you've ended listening to this podcast. It's available.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. And I'll make sure to include that code in the show notes as well. And Anna, thank you so much for making this connection and for bringing this to us and having this conversation, both of you.
Yeah, thank you for being willing to wanting to have us on. It's wonderful. I love your community, and it's beautiful to be able to share with you.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening to another episode of Deep In with Christina. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend, rate it, like it, send me some feedback. We will keep getting better at these over and over. And definitely go to the calendar and check out all the experiences, wedeepen.com. Until next time, enjoy. Bye.